The girl who refused to become a bride. My name is Emily Carter, and I grew up in a family where girls were never allowed to choose their own future. In our community, a girl's life changed the moment she got her first period. That was considered a sign that she was ready for marriage, even if she was only 12 or 13 years old. The men chosen for these girls were often 2 or 3 times their age. When I was 11, I saw something that changed the way I looked at my own future. My cousin Lily got her first period, and within 3 days, my family announced that she had been promised to a 43-year-old man. He had already been married twice, and both of his previous wives had died before reaching their 20s. Everyone around me acted as if this was wonderful news. The women smiled, congratulated Lily, and started discussing her wedding clothes. But I noticed the fear in Lily's eyes. That night, I made a decision that would eventually change my entire life. I decided I would do anything to delay my own first period. I had noticed that the thinner girls in our family usually entered puberty later, so I secretly began eating less and less. I wasn't trying to lose weight. I was trying to buy myself time. The other girls called me skeleton, but I didn't care. I knew exactly what I was doing. While other girls my age were being promised to older men, my parents were already preparing me to become a perfect wife. Every Friday morning, I had to wake up around 1 in the morning and serve food to the adult men in our extended family until 10. I wasn't allowed to speak, make noise, or even look directly at them. If I dropped something or made eye contact, I was punished with 10 strikes of a belt. Sometimes I was forced to hold hot cooking pots with my bare hands because my mother said soft hands would make me a useless wife. Every night, she covered my face with skin-whitening cream and told me that a beautiful girl had a better chance of getting a good husband. I was secretly starving myself because I believed that my body was the only thing standing between me and a forced marriage. Then, when I was 14, something happened that changed everything. One day at school, my teacher, Mrs. Wilson, noticed how extremely thin I had become. She had already been worried about me for some time, but that day she insisted that we talk privately. She asked me to wait in her classroom while she stepped outside for a moment. When I looked around, I noticed that one of her desk drawers had been left unlocked. Inside were several books and pamphlets about child marriage, abuse, and the legal rights of teenagers. One title immediately caught my attention: When Tradition Becomes a Crime. I opened it, and for the first time in my life, I discovered something my parents had never told me. I had rights. Being born into a particular culture did not mean my parents could legally force me into marriage. I read everything I could. I learned about emergency shelters, child protection services, and the people I could contact if someone tried to force me into a marriage. I also learned that teachers, doctors, and counselors had a legal duty to report suspected abuse. I secretly took one of the smallest pamphlets and hid it under my clothes. For the next several weeks, I memorized every important detail. I learned the exact words I needed to say if I ever needed help. Then I decided I couldn't keep this knowledge to myself. My younger cousins were facing the same future. So I secretly started meeting 6 of them in my uncle's old tool shed. We called it our Wife Skills Group, but we weren't learning how to become wives. We were learning how to escape. I taught the girls what I had learned. I explained which adults were legally required to help them. We practiced saying the words that would make authorities take action. They're forcing me to marry. I'm under 18. I'm afraid to go home. We whispered these sentences again and again until every girl knew them by heart. I believed that if I couldn't save myself, at least I could save them. Then, when I was 15, the thing I had feared finally happened. One morning, while I was preparing food, I felt blood soaking through my white dress. My heart stopped. I knew what it meant. My mother saw the blood and screamed with happiness. Within minutes, every woman in the house was celebrating. They kissed my cheeks and told me how lucky I was. I felt like I was watching my own funeral. By that same evening, my father had already chosen my future husband. His name was Marcus Hale, a wealthy construction businessman who was much older than me. People whispered that two of his young wives had died before reaching 23. The official cause was kidney failure, but there were rumors that repeated pregnancies and years of abuse had destroyed their health. Nobody in my family cared. They only cared that Marcus was rich and respected. 2 days later, another girl from our secret group, my cousin Nora, got her first period. Within hours, her parents promised her to a 51-year-old man who already had 8 children older than her. I watched Nora sit silently while the adults discussed her future and negotiated her bride price. She looked completely broken. That night, I secretly gave her my notebook. Inside were the phone numbers, legal information, shelter addresses, and emergency plans I had memorized. "Tomorrow," I whispered, "go to your science teacher. Tell her exactly what we practiced." Nora's hands were shaking. "But what about you?" she asked. "My wedding is in 2 weeks. I'll find a way out." I tried to sound brave, but I was terrified. I didn't know how little time I actually had. The very next night, someone knocked on our front door. It was Child Protection Services. Nora had done exactly what I taught her. She had told a teacher, and the teacher had reported the situation. The officials asked questions about underage girls and forced marriages in our family. They wanted to speak with every girl under 18. My father's face became furious. He knew someone had been teaching us about our rights. After the officials left, the entire family turned against us. They searched every room, every closet, and every corner of the house. My father kept shouting that someone had poisoned the girls with Western ideas. Then they found my notebook in the tool shed. My heart sank when I saw my father holding it. He opened it in front of the entire family and read the phone numbers and legal information. Then he threw it into the fire. He called me sick, corrupted, and dangerous. He said I was like a disease spreading through the family. Then he looked directly at me and said, "Your wedding will happen tomorrow." I knew there was no time left. The next morning, I was supposed to be dressed in red and gold and delivered to a man I believed could destroy my life. I had secretly prepared a small escape bag. It contained a change of clothes, some shelter information I had rewritten from memory, and $20 I had saved by secretly taking $1 at a time from my mother's purse. Before sunrise, my mother came into my room wearing her best clothes. "Get up," she ordered. "The hairdresser will be here soon." I suddenly grabbed my stomach and cried out, "Mama, something is wrong. My stomach hurts." My mother immediately became suspicious. "What did you eat?" she asked. "Nothing," I whispered. "I need the bathroom." She reminded me that I had already gone 20 minutes earlier, but I cried harder and begged her to let me go. She finally released my arm. I ran into the bathroom and locked the door. I had been planning this moment for weeks. I climbed onto the toilet and reached for a loose ceiling tile. I had hidden my escape bag there days earlier. I pulled it down and pushed the bag through a small bathroom window. The window was almost impossible to open, but I had secretly worked on it with a butter knife. Behind me, my family began pounding on the bathroom door. My father shouted that I needed to come out immediately. I pushed against the window with all my strength. The old paint cracked. Cold morning air rushed inside. The opening was tiny, but years of starving myself had made my body small enough to fit through. I pulled myself toward the window just as the bathroom door began to break apart. My shoulders scraped against the frame, and my hips became stuck for a moment. I twisted sideways and finally slipped through. I fell several feet onto the wet grass, twisting my ankle but managing to stay on my feet. Behind me, my family was screaming. I grabbed my bag and ran barefoot through the neighborhood. Dogs started barking. Motion lights turned on. I knew the people living around us. Most of them belonged to families from our community, and I knew they would return me if they caught me. I ran through backyards and between houses while cars began searching the streets. I hid behind garbage bins as headlights passed. Then I heard my cousin Daniel shouting that I couldn't have gone far. I knew I had to reach the main road. I had planned the route in my head hundreds of times. But I had never imagined running it barefoot with blood coming from my feet. A piece of broken glass cut into my heel, but I kept going. I ran through a stranger's garden, tearing my nightgown on the thorns. Finally, I saw the bus stop. A bus was pulling away. I waved desperately. The driver, an older woman, saw my bloody feet and torn clothes and stopped. I climbed aboard and froze when I realized I had left the $20 inside my bag. "Please," I whispered. "I just need to get downtown." The driver didn't ask questions. An elderly passenger quietly put money into the fare machine for me. "Sit down, child," she said. As the bus pulled away, I saw one of my cousin's cars racing into the parking lot. I ducked below the window. The elderly woman beside me shifted in her seat and blocked me from view. Before she got off the bus, she pressed $10 into my hand. "Whatever you're running from," she whispered, "don't go back." I reached the courthouse and walked through the doors with blood on my feet and fear in my heart. I told the clerk the words I had memorized. "I'm 15. My family is forcing me to marry a much older man today. I need protection." The clerk immediately helped me apply for an emergency protective order. I gave her the address of a shelter I had memorized, but when they called, I learned the shelter was full. I had nowhere to go. Then I remembered my teacher, Mrs. Wilson. I knew she sometimes came to school on weekends. So I traveled across the city and found her classroom. When she saw me, she was horrified. My feet were bleeding, my clothes were torn, and I was holding the emergency order in my hand. I finally broke down and cried. "They were going to marry me today," I told her. "The man they chose already had 2 wives who died young. My family is looking for me." Mrs. Wilson immediately called Child Protection Services. But there was a problem. My family had already started creating a different story. My father called the school and claimed I was mentally ill. He said I had stopped taking medication and was imagining things. Then several cars arrived outside the school. My father and uncles had found me. Mrs. Wilson locked the classroom door and called the police. My father began shouting that I was sick and needed to come home. He even carried prescription bottles with my name on them, trying to make the police believe I had a serious mental illness. For a moment, it seemed like his plan might work. Then I remembered something. I rolled up my sleeves and showed Mrs. Wilson the scars on my hands from being forced to hold hot cooking pots. Then I showed her the old belt marks across my back. She took photographs of every injury. Mrs. Wilson also brought out essays I had written at school over the past 2 years. I had hidden the truth inside those assignments, writing about cooking traditions when I was really describing the burns and writing about family expectations when I was really describing forced marriage. The police began looking more carefully at my father's story. Then the school security officer showed them camera footage. It clearly showed my father and uncles arriving with the prescription bottles already prepared. My father had brought them specifically to create evidence against me. During the questioning, my father accidentally mentioned that money from my marriage would not be returned. The officer immediately asked what he meant by marriage money. My father suddenly became quiet. That mistake changed everything. More officials arrived. Child protection workers, police officers, and people from the district attorney's office began reviewing the evidence. My injuries, my school essays, the fake medication story, and the security footage all pointed toward the same conclusion. I was not a mentally ill girl who had run away from a loving family. I was a 15-year-old girl trying to escape a forced marriage. Finally, Child Protection Services placed me into emergency protective custody. My father became furious. He shouted threats at me as officers held him back. I was taken to a hospital so doctors could remove the glass from my foot and treat my injuries. The social worker then searched for a safe emergency placement. Most shelters were full, but eventually they found a woman named Eleanor Brooks, a retired nurse who had experience protecting girls in dangerous family situations. That night, I was taken to Eleanor's home. It had cameras, alarms, and security around the property. For the first time in my life, I slept in a bedroom with a lock that I controlled. But I knew my family would not give up easily. The next morning, Eleanor helped me set up a new phone and change my routines. My teacher visited me and promised she would never abandon me. I was finally safe, but the fight for my freedom had only just begun. The first few days in Eleanor Brooks's house were quiet, but I knew my family was still searching for me. I had a protective order, but that didn't stop them from trying to reach me through other people. On Monday morning, Eleanor's security camera showed my aunt and 2 cousins standing outside her house. They carried food containers and pretended to be worried about me. "We know she's here," my aunt called through the gate. "We only want to talk to her. Her grandmother is sick and misses her." Eleanor didn't answer. She simply called the police and reported the violation. The women left before the police arrived, but one of my cousins held up a sign toward the camera that said, "We love you. Come home." It was the beginning of a new kind of pressure. My family couldn't legally take me, so they started using guilt instead. The next day, my social worker told me that my father had hired a lawyer. They were claiming that I had been brainwashed by teachers and strangers and that I had turned against my own family. They wanted me returned to them. I was terrified, but my lawyer, Patricia Morgan, told me that the evidence was on my side. "Your family can make accusations," she said, "but they can't erase the evidence." Then the flowers started arriving. A huge bouquet appeared at Eleanor's doorstep with a card from my mother. It said, "Our hearts are broken. Please forgive us. We love you." Eleanor photographed the flowers before throwing them away. "Every contact matters," she told me. "We document everything." I started attending a new school under special protection. My records were kept private, and the school counselor knew about my situation. She gave me a safe place to eat lunch if I ever felt threatened. For the first time, I was surrounded by adults who believed me. But my family found ways to remind me that they were still watching. One afternoon, I noticed one of my uncle's work trucks parked near the school. I immediately went back inside and called Eleanor. She arrived quickly and recorded the vehicle before driving me home. Then my father's lawyer sent legal papers. They claimed I had been manipulated and that my family was simply trying to protect our culture. Patricia looked through the documents and shook her head. "This is a common strategy," she explained. "They will talk about culture and family honor. We will talk about your safety and your legal rights." A few days later, my father took his campaign to social media. He posted my picture publicly and wrote that his daughter was mentally ill and had been taken away by people filling her head with lies. He asked the public to help find me. Within hours, the post was spreading through community groups. People who didn't know me were calling me unstable and dangerous. Some even offered rewards for information about where I was. My lawyer said my father was trying to control the story before the truth could come out. Then came the betrayal that hurt the most. One of the younger girls from our secret group, my cousin Mia, appeared in a video with her mother. She repeated a message that clearly had been Mother. She repeated a message that clearly had been written for her. She said I had lied to the girls, turned them against their parents, and made them hate their culture. I knew she didn't mean those words. I could see the fear in her eyes. Still, watching her say them broke my heart. "They are using the girls you tried to protect against you," Eleanor told me. "That doesn't mean you were wrong." A few days later, another cousin secretly brought me an envelope. Her name was Sarah, and she was 3 years older than me. She arrived at Eleanor's house pretending to deliver legal documents. When I saw her face through the window, I immediately recognized her. She looked at me for only a second, but I saw tears in her eyes. Inside the envelope were photographs of my family. My grandmother looked weak. My little sister was celebrating her birthday. My mother was crying while preparing my favorite meal. Every picture was designed to make me feel guilty. But the last photograph made me feel sick. It showed Nora, the girl who had been promised to the older man after me. She was wearing an engagement ring and standing between her parents. Someone had written on the back, "She came home. She's happy now. You can come home too." I knew it was a lie. Nora's eyes looked empty. My family had forced her back. My lawyer said Nora's testimony could become important, but I knew she was too frightened to speak. Then, one night, Sarah contacted me again. This time she came through Patricia's office. When I saw her in person, I barely recognized her. She had lost weight, and her face looked exhausted. She whispered that my family had forced her to return. They had threatened to hurt her younger sister if she refused. Then she told me something that made my blood run cold. My family had stopped trying to bring me home. Instead, they were talking about making an example of me. They wanted every girl in the community to understand what happened to someone who betrayed the family. Sarah didn't know exactly what they planned, but she had heard them mention my school and my daily routines. Before leaving, she gave me an address written on a small piece of paper. "There are other girls there," she whispered. "They need help too." I realized then that the problem was much bigger than my own family. There were girls everywhere who had been taught that they had no choice. I wanted to help them, but first I had to survive. A few days later, Eleanor's security alarm went off. Someone had broken a window at the back of the house. I locked myself inside the bathroom while Eleanor called the police. I could hear men moving through the house. They were calling my name and pretending they only wanted to talk. Then they began hitting the bathroom door. I was terrified. I had no idea what I could do against several grown men. Suddenly, police sirens filled the street. The men ran before officers arrived, leaving broken glass and muddy footprints behind. The police told us that whoever had come inside had planned the attack carefully. My social worker said I needed to move again. But this time I refused to let fear control me. "If I keep running, they'll keep believing they can silence me," I said. "I want to do something before I leave." I called Mrs. Wilson, my old teacher. "Do you remember those pamphlets?" I asked. "I think we need to make more." That was how the idea began. We created small information packets that could be hidden inside ordinary school notebooks. Emergency phone numbers were disguised as math problems. Legal rights were written like history notes. Escape instructions were hidden between pages. We planned to distribute them through school nurses, counselors, and trusted teachers because they were legally required to help children in danger. Within days, the packets were ready. We knew many would be discovered or destroyed, but we believed that even one packet reaching the right girl could save a life. Then something incredible happened. A social worker brought a teenage girl to my new safe house. She came from a different family in our community. She had recently been promised to a much older man. "I found your notebook," she whispered. "The one with the math problems that were actually phone numbers." I couldn't believe it. The information I had once hidden in a small notebook was already spreading. That same week, I received a call from a girl using a friend's phone. She told me that 6 girls had found our information. 3 of them had already been promised to older men. They were meeting secretly and sharing copies of the pages. I gave them instructions about how to speak to teachers and counselors. I made them repeat the emergency numbers until they knew them. One girl asked me, "What if our families catch us?" I told her the truth. "Then you try again. And again. Keep asking for help until someone listens." My father soon discovered what we were doing. His lawyer tried to accuse me of corrupting minors and interfering with parents. They wanted to frighten me into silence. Instead, I decided to speak publicly. Mrs. Wilson introduced me to a journalist who worked on human rights stories. We agreed that my real name and face would never be shown, but the story of what was happening needed to be told. The article was being prepared when another emergency came. One of the girls who had contacted me was 16-year-old Layla. Her family had discovered that she was trying to escape. They planned to move her out of the country the next morning. We knew that once she disappeared across a border, finding her would become much harder. I went with a security officer to watch the courthouse from a safe distance. Hours later, I saw Layla arrive with two older relatives. Our eyes met through the car window. I couldn't reach her, so I silently mouthed one word, "Run." She couldn't run, but she remembered something else I had taught her. She suddenly dropped to the ground and began screaming that she was sick. When security officers came closer, she grabbed one of them and whispered something into his ear. Within minutes, child protection workers were called. Her relatives tried to convince everyone that she was fine, but Layla refused to stop asking for help. She was finally taken into protective custody. Another girl had escaped the fate planned for her. But my family became more dangerous. One morning, a car in the parking lot near our safe house was set on fire. Inside the trunk, police found several dolls dressed in wedding clothes that had been burned. The message was obvious. They wanted me to understand what could happen if I refused to obey. Everyone wanted me moved again. This time, however, I agreed to stay with stronger security. Police officers began checking the area, panic buttons were installed, and my location was changed regularly. Then the article was finally published. It spread much faster than anyone expected. Women who had escaped similar marriages contacted the journalist. Teachers and social workers shared information. Organizations offered legal help and safe housing. Then I received a message from an unknown number. It was from Nora. She wrote only one sentence. 12 girls in 3 states have copies of the notebooks. I stared at the message for a long time. I had spent years believing I was one frightened girl trying to survive. Now I realized that the knowledge I had learned in secret was becoming something much bigger. My family responded by officially disowning me. They announced that my name would be removed from family records and that anyone who spoke to me would also be rejected. In their world, being erased from your family was supposed to be worse than death. But when I read the announcement, I felt something I hadn't expected. I felt free. They had taken away their love, their approval, and their family name. But they couldn't take away my life. They couldn't take away my voice. And they couldn't take away the knowledge I had already given to other girls. More girls began seeking help. Some reached shelters. Others filed emergency protection orders. A few were caught before they could escape, but they managed to tell teachers what was happening. My lawyer helped organize a larger group of people who wanted to protect these girls. We called it the Freedom Circle. It started with a few notebooks and became a real support network. Teachers, nurses, social workers, lawyers, and former victims joined us. We created emergency plans, safe housing connections, and legal support systems. Then came the final court hearing. I walked into the courtroom expecting to see my family, but this time something had changed. The room was filled with girls and women who had escaped similar situations. They were there to support me. My father had already lost much of his power. His lawyer tried one last time to argue that my family had only wanted to preserve our culture. The judge listened carefully before responding. Culture does not give anyone the right to abuse a child or force her into marriage, she said. The protective order remained permanent. My parents were forbidden from contacting me. Any violation could lead to criminal charges. Outside the courtroom, I saw Fatima, the woman I had once believed was dead. She had been one of Marcus Hale's former wives. She had escaped years earlier and had been living quietly under another name. She had become a nurse and built a life of her own. She hugged me and said, "You are not alone. There are more of us than they want you to believe." That moment changed me. I realized that survival wasn't just about escaping. It was about making sure the next girl didn't have to fight alone. The Freedom Circle held its first official meeting soon afterward. Mrs. Wilson was there. Eleanor was there. Patricia was there. Social workers, teachers, and women who had escaped forced marriages joined us too. We planned emergency shelters, information packets, legal assistance, and ways to reach girls secretly. That evening, my phone rang. It was another frightened girl. "I found your notebook," she whispered. "Can you help me?" I picked up my pen and began writing down everything she told me. As I listened, I thought about the girl I had once been. The frightened 15-year-old who had climbed through a tiny bathroom window because she believed it was her only chance to live. I thought about the girls who were still trapped and the ones who were waiting for someone to tell them that they had a choice. My family had tried to erase me. They had called me sick. They had called me dangerous. They had tried to turn the community against me. They had even tried to make me afraid of my own voice. But they had failed. Because every time they tried to silence me, another girl learned the truth. Every notebook became another doorway. Every teacher who listened became another chance. Every girl who escaped became proof that the cycle could be broken. I knew the fight was not over. There would always be families who believed tradition was more important than freedom. There would always be girls who needed help. But I also knew something my family never wanted me to learn. I had the right to choose my own life. And now, thousands of miles away from the house where I was once treated like someone's future property, I was helping other girls discover that same truth. My family erased my name from theirs, but they could never erase what I had started. Because I was no longer just the girl who escaped a forced marriage. I had become the person who showed others that escape was possible. And sometimes, all it takes to change a life is one girl brave enough to say, no.